Bitcoin's verifiable and trustless exchange enables human freedom and free speech to continue across a digitally connected landscape. Welcome to Bitcoin Brunch, Bitcoin news, education, and commentary. We pull it all together so you don't have to, curating the latest Bitcoin news and topics that you need to know about. Hi, I'm Alicia, a mom with an orange heart, and the host of Bitcoin Brunch. This is episode number 4 for the week of October 2nd, 2024. Thanks for listening to our podcast. We're happy you could join us for our Bitcoin Brunch Break, where we aim to keep you in the Bitcoin loop. Okay, everybody, let's get going. I've got my coffee cup warmed up, so let's get into what's been happening the past few weeks. So, if you haven't noticed, Bitcoin has been bouncing up and down quite a bit these past few weeks. We were around 63, then down to 58. Then we popped up to say hi to 66. Then hit a little detour down to around 60. And then up again. It's literally like a weather vane, changing direction every time the wind blows. There's a lot going on in the world, and with the US presidential election nearing, I expect more volatility. Bitcoin will bounce up and down along with the world, and likely your mood. Today, we all encounter a constant waterfall of stories, news, information, and opinions from various sources. It's difficult to pour through the content, find something meaningful, and keep from getting caught up in trivial stories or other people's mindless calls for attention. Much of the content is attention-grabbing, but data-less, without any depth of story or point. Sometimes content seems meant only to influence your opinion or distract you from something important. Often you read something, but then it disappears again, leaving you unsure where you read or heard it. Sometimes one story flies by that is important and warrants further examination. Sometimes you tag it, but rarely have time to go back and review your tags. Bitcoin Brunch aims to help you sort through the gibberish and point out important stories that should be on your radar. We curate important stories about Bitcoin, money, and freedom. We currently have a semi-monthly article, the Bitcoin Brunch Brief, which we publish on X, and a podcast, Bitcoin Brunch Break, which you can find on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We are working on our website, which we hope will bring it all together. Bitcoin Brunch is an inflection point, and even though we are small, sometimes it's one story, one post that matters. As Steve Jobs once said, "This revolution, the information revolution, is a revolution of free energy as well, but of another kind, free intellectual energy." Burgers, BlackRock, and Bitcoin. A few weeks ago, President Trump made history as the first U.S. president to publicly transact in Bitcoin. Trump bought the world's first Bitcoin burger at Pub Key, a Bitcoin bar in New York City. The world took notice as Bitcoiners everywhere celebrated the historic transaction. Not only did the historic transaction showcase the potential ease of using Bitcoin for everyday purchases, but between pizza and burgers, Bitcoin is a reflection of the American spirit. Later that week, the Fed announced a rate cut of 50 basis points, which was larger than expected. The market cheered as it kicked away the FUD and raced upward to make new trends. Between the Fed rate cut of 50 basis points and Trump's Bitcoin burger, the mood was overall positive and the market reflected the week with a big Bitcoin burger bump, rising over 63,000 for the first time since the end of August. It was what I call the Bitcoin burger bump. Since the burger bump, the Bitcoin price per US dollar has bounced around 63K, reaching an upward high trend of 66,000. But then Bitcoin strutted its energetic nature and trended down again to back around 63K, this week likely due to lags in ETF settlements and other global influences. There is recent news of the Fed potentially cutting the rate another 50 basis points in November. Thus, October and November will be volatile with the upcoming US elections and various global events affecting Bitcoin's trend line. Don't be afraid of the volatility, as the ups and downs are part of Bitcoin's recipe. Bitcoin's finite number of 21 million and limited supply make it prone to volatility. Like a toddler testing its walking shoes, Bitcoin is a bit wobbly, but its wobble is its strength, and that's how Bitcoin builds its muscle. Before long, Bitcoin will learn to walk steady, and at some point may start running. You can't learn to walk without a sofa to hang on to, and if nothing else, you can hang on to the words of Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock. As even Larry recently affirmed, Bitcoin is a legitimate financial instrument. Larry has been out and about lately backing Bitcoin and now believes there is a role for Bitcoin in portfolios. The SEC approved options on BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF. This will likely bring in more money and more volatility with the gamblers, traders, getting a chance to play on Bitcoin's price action. Whether good or bad for long-term holders, BlackRock has laid their cornerstone of the Bitcoin building. This week, BlackRock added to their footing and purchased more than $17 billion worth of Bitcoin. Here's a quote from Judy Garland that feels appropriate. Give the people what they want, and then go have a hamburger. The story of the 5 little banks. This is the story of 5 little banks who have almost all been scared away. There is one brave little bank remaining, and they are fighting for all of us Americans. Every American needs to know this story because their fight is really about whether the U.S. heads towards freedom or a totalitarian future. In 2023, the Fed targeted banks that specifically serviced the crypto industry and served a majority of crypto-based businesses and customers. Elizabeth Warren and the Fed went after these banks and knocked them off one by one. Their attempt to kill off the crypto banking industry should not be taken lightly. Why would the Fed care about these 5 little banks? According to Caitlin Long, the CEO of Custodia Bank, and the last little bank, Elizabeth Warren said it herself, she wants a CBDC. They are trying with all their might to set the ground for CBDCs. The Fed has been busy behind the curtain choking out little banks that get in the way and assigning special status to other banks. This limits consumer choices and it's called protectionism, and it's wrong. The Fed warned these little banks in early 2023 that if they serviced the Bitcoin and crypto industry, they would face great risk. The Fed took out Silvergate and held it up as an example, causing fear across crypto and Bitcoin banks, which led to several other crypto servicing banks to fail. In March 2023, Silvergate, the first one, fell off and caused a 2023 panic and third largest bank failure. According to an article by Marty Bent, Silvergate did not fail. They were forced to shut down by Elizabeth Warren and her acolytes at the regulatory agencies. According to another article by Nick Carter, the collapse of Silvergate triggered the 2023 banking crisis that would ultimately take down Silicon Valley Bank, Signature, and First Republic. The Fed's goal was to destroy Silvergate, wave them in the air for all to see, and debank crypto for good. In January 2023, warnings were issued to Silvergate and other crypto servicing banks. Custodia was denied. In February of 2023, Paxos and Protego Bank's charters were withdrawn. March 8, 2023, Silvergate Bank failed. March 10, 2023, Silicon Valley Bank failed. March 12, 2023, Signature Bank failed. Marty Bent said, the Fed is actively undermining the dual banking system that was set up in this country to enable competition between state-chartered banks and the Federal Reserve System. The Fed is handpicking and giving privilege to a select few big banks that they will grant to handle crypto. And this is unconstitutional, folks. The collapse of Silicon Valley Bank caused significant damage not only to its customers, but to every American. Customers withdrew $42 billion in funds, crippling startups and the large technology companies who were customers. The FDIC Deposit Insurance Fund took a $40 billion hit. Billion. This caused every other bank to increase their premiums and fees to cover the added expense, and thus every American paid for this failure. So this is why you and me need to understand what is going on. Nobody thinks about banks much and what they really stand for. But banks are a vehicle for how we use and hold our money. If the Fed is crippling the little banks who want to service a group of people, then they are limiting what we can do with our hard-earned money. The Fed is crowning certain banks the winner. These banks get special privileges and access to a potential windfall of money in the expanding Bitcoin and crypto industries. Why are some banks handpicked and other little banks choked off, you ask? Well, who will commit to do the Fed's bidding when the time comes? The special crypto power given to a select few banks potentially creates an environment where the government holds control over these banks. This puts us one step closer to CBDCs, where the Fed creates a central bank digital currency, forcing us to use government CBDCs where everything we do and purchase is surveilled and tracked. I'm not going to go in depth into CBDCs here, but anybody who believes in freedom for our children should be very concerned about the potential for CBDCs, which governments everywhere hope to implement for absolute control over the individual. The AI algorithm created and controlled by the government can debank you or cut off access to your money at will for any reason, any critique, or any action they deem. Marty Bent said, Warren's vendetta against Bitcoin and the digital asset industry incited the largest banking crisis in recent years, and it is all because Elizabeth Warren wants to live in a world in which we are forced to use CBDCs and unable to opt into Bitcoin. Caitlin Long said, they were just trying to kill crypto. They succeeded in killing the 5 crypto banks, and out of the 5, only 1 is still standing. And so there remains only one little brave bank left, Custodia Bank, and they are still fighting for little banks, for the Constitution, and for all of our freedom. There's a lot to this story, and for more depth of thought, listen to Marty Bent's video conversation with Caitlin Long, CEO of Custodia Bank. For more detailed information, read Marty's article about Custodia and how Warren incited the banking crisis of 2023, and Nick Carter's article about the Fed's plan to debank crypto. Links to the video and articles are in the show notes. Satoshi Nakamoto said, commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions serving as trusted third parties to process electronic payments. While the system works well enough for most transactions, it still suffers from the inherent weakness of the trust-based model. Watch out for the FUD Puppets. They have a name, they have an audience, they have perceived clout. It seems they have an agenda to dismantle certain ideas or reinforce a particular narrative. Who pays their wages? Not sure, but they seem to come out strong on mainstream media against Bitcoin when needed. They spread fear and doubt and keep the general public at bay, as most people don't have time to look into it. And when they hear these big names discredit Bitcoin, it just pushes it further down on their list of to-dos. Recently, Bill Maher talked about crypto on his show and said Bitcoin and crypto is nonsense and ridiculous. Earlier this year, Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Bank claimed the only true use case of Bitcoin is by criminals for money laundering and tax evasion. Once you understand the psychology of money and get past the head spin, it's easy to ignore them, and it's not hard to focus on Bitcoin. The only hard part is deciding whether to call them Bitcoin bozos or FUD puppets. And funnily enough, JP Morgan recently revealed even they own Bitcoin. So the moral of this story is to ignore the FUD puppets. Don't listen to what people say, watch what they do. Bitcoin is another word for freedom. If for no other reason you decide to purchase Bitcoin, then purchase it for your belief in freedom and your children. Bitcoin is a digital monetary system which may continue freedom into the digital future. Bitcoin is not only an electronic cash system that works peer-to-peer with no reliance on a centralized third party, but its protocol also functions as a means to protect your value and your freedoms. Of all the features of Bitcoin, the most distinct and significant is that Bitcoin ensures free speech. Throughout history, those in power buy and use the media, newspapers, magazines, radio, and TV to control what you hear and influence what you think. George Soros just bought 200 radio stations. FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr just announced the FCC voted to approve the transfer of a broadcast license, let alone the transfer of broadcast licenses for over 200 radio stations across more than 40 markets, without following the requirements and procedures codified in federal law. For what purpose does one want to own and control 200 radio stations? Perhaps to have a hand in who is speaking and what is being spoken. perhaps to choose what information is disseminated across a large population. Will the First Amendment continue to protect free speech in a digital world? Recent news articles and politicians have been implying that the First Amendment may be dangerous. A recent article in The New Yorker was titled, "Is it time to torch the Constitution?" When governments have the means to digitally access and view every aspect of our lives, photos, medical records, school essays, journals, financial documents, will the government-funded AI safety-conscious algorithm limit our access based on what we think or say? What if we think differently or have a complaint? Will they obstruct our access to certain experiences or opportunities if they don't like what we say? The government only wants to help you by being the referee. They know better and want to be in control of the information you can access. Under the guise of safety, some in power want to be able to control what you hear and say. There is no disinformation or misinformation, only new words for the information the referee doesn't want you to notice. Who decides which information is good or should be removed, or if it is malicious or confusing? Who will be the referee? An AI-guided algorithm fed by safely worded, government-approved information funnels? John Kerry recently said, "It's really hard to govern today. The referees we used to have to determine what's a fact and what isn't a fact have eviscerated. People self-select. We need to win the right to govern so that we're free to implement change." Kerry said, "Our First Amendment stands as a major block, and he wants to be able to delete certain sources of information of government's choosing out of existence." Bitcoin is unique as it is a mathematical expression that can uphold human freedom and free speech into the digital future. Bitcoin's decentralized system disseminates control through a peer-to-peer network of independent nodes across the world. Without a centralized referee to oversee or approve your transactions, Satoshi's protocol prevents institutions, governments, or corporate powers from silencing you. Bitcoin's verifiable and trustless exchange enables human freedom and free speech to continue across a digitally connected landscape. As Hal Finney once said, "If you want to change the world, don't protest, write code." SEC was wrong. Bitcoin is not a security. The SEC strives to name anything they can't control a security. Yankee tickets, NFTs, digital collectibles, and even Bitcoin. The SEC wants to regulate digital assets and define them as securities. Is a JPEG of an ape a security? A WAV file of a song a security? It is a question digital Web3 creators have had to fight against. Recently, one of the largest NFT marketplaces, OpenSea, became a target of an SEC probe. They received a Wells notice from the SEC threatening to sue them because the SEC believes NFTs on their platform are securities. OpenSea is fighting back. They posted on X, "NFTs are fundamentally creative goods, art, collectibles, video game items, domain names, event tickets, and more. We should not regulate digital art in the same way we regulate collateralized debt obligations." The idea of a JPEG or NFT being a security got under the skin of many crypto supporters, artists, musicians, and creators in the Web3 world. To make a point, one creator named Soljaki minted an NFT out of a photo of Gensler and declared, "You are now a security, Gary Gensler." He minted the NFT on Phantom and posted the NFT of Gary on X. So the question is the NFT of Gary a security? He may be a security, but he's definitely not an asset. The classification of crypto is still yet undetermined, and cryptocurrencies may be closer to being considered a security if people are buying them solely for monetary gain. But NFT art, music, PFP collections are non-security assets. NFTs are unique, decentralized digital collectibles and held as any other collectible like a painting or baseball card. Tokens or coins, when separated from the contract, may be considered non-securities. Time and debate will eventually resolve the crypto security arguments. The future of crypto is being hammered out now, and creators, marketplaces, and tokens each have their claims. But most importantly, Bitcoin is different in its decentralized protocol and a maximum supply of 21 million Bitcoins. So finally, this last week, we have multiple officials, SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce and even Gary Gensler himself, live on CNBC, clearly affirming the obvious, that Bitcoin is not a security. A quote by Satoshi: "I've developed a new open source PTP eCash system called Bitcoin. It's completely decentralized, with no central server or trusted parties, because everything is based on crypto proof instead of trust." Bitcoin is a bit punk, and you're a bit punk. Bitcoin at its core is a bit punk. Satoshi's white paper was first circulated on the cypherpunks mailing list, after all. The cypherpunk movement began in the late 80s as a group of people who valued privacy and individual freedoms, and believed decentralization and cryptography could be used to safeguard freedom. Similar to the cypherpunks, punk music is a genre of music that rejected the mainstream with a bit of anarchy, that wanted to decentralize from convention and revel in its pure sound. Punk music embraced the raw energy with a do-it-yourself mentality. Punk rock music, in its essence, was a voice to rebel against the system, so anyone who likes Bitcoin is a bit of a bit punk. A bit punk is someone who believes in freedom, self-reliance, limited government, and takes responsibility for their own decisions. These characteristics lead many to find Bitcoin. Bit punks tend to have a bit of a rebellious nature that is required to stick with Bitcoin through its hypes and fades. Punk music provided a space where one could speak out against the system, and since money is the biggest centralized system, it only makes sense Bitcoiners carry a bit of a punk streak in their heart. I saw this video created by Real Richard and Carla Bitcoin on X, and even though it's not punk music, I think it captures the bit punk vibe. You can watch it on X, and I will put the link in the show notes. If you don't like it or understand it, maybe show it to your kids, and I bet they will. After all, like Bitcoin, punk rock is just another word for freedom. That's a quote by Patti Smith. And so now we close with some Bitcoin math. So what is a Bitcoin and what is a Satoshi? Here's a quote by Satoshi Nakamoto. "Eventually, at most only 21 million coins for 6.8 billion people in the world if it really gets huge. But don't worry, there are another 6 decimal places that aren't shown, for a total of 8 decimal places internally. It shows 1, but internally it's 1.0000000. If there's massive deflation in the future, the software could show more decimal places. 1 Bitcoin is equal to about 100 million sats, and 1 Satoshi, or sat, is 100 millionth of a Bitcoin. So today, 1 sat is worth way less than a cent. 1,000 sats is about 60 cents, 100,000 sats is about $61, 1 million sats is about $600, and 10 million sats about $6,000. So as Bitcoin grows in number, you can start thinking about it in sats. Today, 100 million sats equals 1 Bitcoin. In the future, we may need other denominations to distinguish even smaller amounts. Thanks for listening to my brunch break, where I aim to keep you in the Bitcoin loop. If you enjoyed our brunch break, then grab a cup of coffee with me next time and follow Bitcoin Brunch on X for daily, weekly updates. Rise and shine, everyone, and have a brilliant day. This is Alicia with Bitcoin Brunch. Bitcoin news, education, and commentary. A source for women and busy people. The brunch brief is provided for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not offered or intended to be used as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice.